Well, welcome everybody today to our weekly ongoing coaching meeting. As you know, we've been talking the last couple of weeks through the 7 elements. You may have heard the different names for these. We often call them 7 ongoing elements. They're also referred to as the 7 high value activities. Have you heard them called that before? 7 ongoing elements, 7 high value activities. Another way we'll say it is 7 ways to raise the sails for movement. So these are just 7 keys, 7 things that we talk about a lot. We do series on these and we'll dive deep into them because these are 7 high value activities that can yield a lot of fruit and hopefully lead to the multiplication of disciples and churches and leaders and movements in our area. So Brent and Jim and Susie have taken us through the first 6, and Jim assigned me to take us through number 7. So the 7th high value activity, or the 7th ongoing element, is what? You guys know. Ongoing coaching. Now, I remember when you went through the training, I don't know if you did the signals. Some of you all may have done the signals that we do, but what was your signal for ongoing coaching? I'm looking at your windows. I can't hear you, but I can see it. Yeah, okay, like baseball, ongoing coaching. Okay, yeah, a lot of you. Okay. So, yeah, so we're talking about ongoing coaching, that element today. Now, I think I've said this before, but I want to say it again because I think it surprises people. So I'll often ask people, what do you think? I'll ask like I'm asking you, what do you think I think is the most important of the 7 high value activities? What do you think that I think is the most important of the 7 elements? And usually people might say, well, Chris, I bet you think it's multiplying extraordinary prayer. You got to pray, man. How are we going to see anything without prayer? Or you think, well, it's got to be focused on God's word because God's word's at the center, right? We got to focus on God's word. It's got to be the most important. And then often I'll surprise people by saying, in my opinion, this is not for sure the correct answer, but my opinion is that ongoing coaching is the most important of the 7 elements. And the reason I say that is because I think often without ongoing coaching, we stop doing the other elements. We're not consistent in focusing on God's word. We're not consistent in multiplying extraordinary prayer or going out among the lost. So I think ongoing coaching kind of helps them all be held together. And it's in a coaching environment like this one where you can get accountability and inspiration, and you can get, be challenged to live out all of the elements. So I'm not sure why it matters that I think one of them is more important than the others, except to say, I think we can't miss ongoing coaching, even though it may sound, that doesn't sound like going out among the lost or seeing groups start. It is huge. Okay. Ongoing coaching. That's what we're talking about. So what is the starting point for ongoing coaching? All the coaches have been telling you throughout the series what the starting points are for each of the elements. We get the starting points from our book, From Megachurch to Multiplication. I worked with Stan when we were putting the book together to give everybody with each of the 7 elements or high value activities a place to start. This is the floor, not the ceiling. This is not where you want to end up, but it's like a place to start, right? So if you read the chapter in the book on ongoing coaching, it tells you that the starting point is this. I'll read it exactly. The starting point, let me copy and paste it for you. The starting point for this element, this is where you want to start. Everybody needs to be doing this, is that we participate in an ongoing coaching meeting at least once per week. You may think, done, done. But we're actually going to dive a little deeper into the words in that sentence and make sure we're really participating, and it's really weekly, and we're really, being coached in the process. So that's the starting point. On this element, I would encourage you to participate in an ongoing coaching meeting at least once per week. And those that you're training, those that you're coaching, you're wanting to encourage people, hey, once a week, let's participate in ongoing coaching. Now, when we talk about ongoing coaching as an element, we're primarily talking about the importance of you being coached. Should you coach other people? Absolutely. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But I want to share with you some lessons I've learned about ongoing coaching, and specifically about being coached. Many of you are on this call because ongoing coaching is important, and so you're here for coaching. Okay, so I want to talk to you about that first, and then we'll talk about the importance of coaching others. So I think week 1, Jim gave you like 9 lessons learned, maybe no, Susie, I'm not sure, Susie, if you did lessons learned, but a couple weeks ago, Jim gave 9. Last week, Brent said he had to one up Jim, so he gave 10. I'm going to actually move down from these guys. I'm going to do 8, okay? Because they're much cooler than I am, okay? So I'm going to do 8 lessons learned that I've learned about ongoing coaching and its importance. So I can, somebody may want to write these down. I think Grace did it last week, or somebody could volunteer to put these in the chat. But I'm going to go through the 8. And then after the 8, I want to talk to you specifically about this coaching call, who it's for, what the expectations are. Cool? Number 1, ongoing coaching. Grace, thank you. Yes, awesome. Here's number 1 lesson that I've learned that's really important to be raising this sale of ongoing coaching. Number 1, seek out coaches who are a few steps ahead of you. Seek out coaches or go to coaching groups, be a part of coaching groups with coaches or people that are a few steps ahead of you. The reason I say it like this is because not all of us can be coached by a movement catalyst, right? We need to be coached by just somebody a few steps ahead of us. They don't have to have seen, millions come to Christ yet or anything. That would be awesome. But you can still be well coached by somebody a few steps ahead of you. So as you guys know from reading the book, Stan was our initial coach and continues to provide coaching to us. And he would probably not call himself a movement catalyst. He's not been, I don't believe, before on like a team that has catalyzed a movement in a given place, but he coaches and works with lots of movement catalysts. So certainly he was many steps ahead of us. And so he made a great coach for us and our team. So you're looking for coaches. They don't have to be total experts. They don't have to know everything. You just, on this call, hopefully, because you think that there's some people here that are a few steps ahead of you. That's why in our breakout groups, you guys, you'll hear me sometimes talk about our +1 coaches. All these folks that are coaches, none of them are movement catalysts yet, but probably a lot of them are maybe a few steps ahead of you, which makes them a great coach for you. So Stan was that for us. Also, another guy named Steve has been that for us with our Ty and Lau work here in DFW. So, and I feel coached being a part of this group. I think some of you guys in certain areas are steps ahead of us. And so this has been a great group to learn from for us and for our team as well. So number 1, seek out coaches who are a few steps ahead of you. I think a lot of you have done that, and that's why you're here. Okay. Number 2, this is important. Be consistent. Be consistent. What's the point of coaching unless you're consistently getting it, right? Think about it with business coaching or coaching in sports or coaching in exercise or dieting. If the coaching is sporadic, it's not all that helpful, right? Coaching is more helpful when it's consistent. Most people that have a trainer, they don't meet with them once every 6 months, usually. They might meet with them 3 times a week, at least initially, right? While they're learning, or 4, or at least once a week. I mean, coaching is more valuable when you're getting it consistently, which is why you'll often hear me say, hey, if you can't consistently come to this meeting, let's get you in a meeting that you can consistently come to, because I'm not a big believer in if you just show up here sporadically, you're going to get much out of it. I think you've got to be consistent. So what Stan told us is, he said with DMM coaching, he said in the early years, and by early years, he meant at least like the first 3 years, you should be getting coaching at least once or twice a week. And he kind of compared it to like Jesus and his disciples in those years, spending a lot of time with them in the early days before they're, released and sent out. And then Stan has said sometimes he's seen in movements around the world that after the first 3 years, 4 years, it can become more like once a month or once every couple of weeks. The same would be true, wouldn't it, with a trainer? Or once you pick up tennis, you're learning to play tennis, you learn to play pickleball in the early days, you need a lot of help every week, but after 3 or 4 years, maybe once a month with your coach can work. Same principle here. So I would say if you're in this ongoing coaching group or another, we often use the number 90%. You should be going 90+% of the time. If you really want to be coached. If you don't want to be coached, then you can go to different events, less often, but this is a coaching group. This is designed to help you to the degree we can, implement those 7 high value activities. So you need consistent feedback from a coach in your work, in what you're doing, how you're doing it, and they can help you know what next steps to take. So, I wrote that you need consistency for coaching to be effective. So number 2, be consistent. And remember, back to the starting point, we said participate in an ongoing coaching meeting at least once per week. If you're not doing that now, and I know I love all, first of all, I may say some pretty strong things today. I want you to know I love all of you. You're all awesome, okay? But if you can't come 90% of the time, I understand. Life is busy. Things are crazy. Let's just let's find a group that's a better time for you, right? Rather than just coming to this group sporadically and then really not getting the progress that you'd like to get. Okay, I'll stop. I could keep going. I'll stop. All right, number 2 is be consistent. Number 3, for a lesson learned from ongoing coaching, take a next step each week and watch those next steps compound over time. Take a next steps, like getting a base hit. You don't have to get a home run every week. You don't have to start 10 churches a week. But if you can take a next step each week in your process of trying to catalyze a movement, you'll see them compound over time. So the goal, as you guys know, of a coaching meeting like this is not just to learn something. The goal of this coaching meeting, I want you to hear it from me. We started this coaching meeting years ago. The goal of this coaching meeting is to help you take a next step. That's the goal. Now, because a lot of us come from a Western context, we love learning, and you love the main session. You come maybe for the main session, you prioritize the main session, and hey, we got a good speaker coming in, and he or she's going to be great. And I'm letting you know, me and the coaches will often say the accountability groups, the breakout groups, are the most important part of this coaching call. Because often the reason we haven't seen what we want to see yet isn't just that we don't have the information we need, although sometimes that's what we think. It's because we haven't implemented the things that we've already been taught, the things that we already know. Does that make sense? The goal isn't just to learn something here, and I hope you do learn some things. A lot of you are here because you've already learned. You took a training. You've been through a training. Did you know that basic training that many of you went through is the same training that movement catalysts now that have seen hundreds of thousands or millions come to Christ? It's the same training they went through. I mean, most of you already know plenty. You got the 7 high values. We're ready to go. What do we need to do now? Take next steps every single week and be held accountable for taking them, and take another one the next week. You guys tracking with me? Like I said, you don't have to take huge steps every week for them to compound over time, but think about how many times do we meet a year? Not 52, 48-ish, 47, I don't know, however many times we meet a year. Think about 48 small next steps over the course of a year. Does that lead you somewhere? 48 next steps if you were held accountable and you actually did it? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Imagine if all of us committed today for the next 48 weeks that we meet for the rest of the year or whatever, to just take just even if it's small, a next step every week. You know, some in the business world, if you follow business authors or you're on Twitter following business guys, they'll often talk about getting 1% better, right? You have to get 50% better overnight, but just you're always trying to get 1% better. That's kind of the idea of taking next steps each week. And then what goes along with this is not only taking a next step, but every week your coach is asking you, did you take the next step you said you would last week? And it's accountability. Hey, did you take that next step? Oh no, you didn't. Okay, well let's take it. Come on. It's not about just learning. We got to live this out. Let's take a next step this week. Information isn't the goal. Action is. Obedience, we call it obedience. Information isn't the goal. Obeying the Lord, following him, doing these things we know to be doing. That's the goal. That's number 3. All right. Number 4, things we've learned from ongoing coaching. Number 4, be humble and teachable, or coaching will be of no value. Right? We all know this. I'm telling you things you already know, but they're real important. Be humble and teachable, or coaching will be of no value. Now, you guys already know this, but quite a few of your pastors can be hard to coach. Why? We've been to seminary. We've had, maybe an undergraduate degree in Bible. Some of us, you got a master's degree. You've built a church. You've been a part of a denomination. It's taking you through all these trainings. As pastors, often we can kind of think we know what we're doing, right? We know what we need to be doing. Maybe the same is true for missionaries or other church leaders for sure. But, we can be hard to coach. But if we want coaching, and we want somebody helping us know what next steps to take, we've got to be humble and teachable, or else we're not going to listen to them. With Stan in the early days, couldn't we have pulled the, hey, we're pastors of a big church card? Why should we listen to Stan? Stan's out there, helping these guys catalyze movements, but we've got a good sized church. I mean, what do we need to learn? No, that's not how you're going to learn and grow, right? You've got to be humble and teachable and say, hey, maybe I've been a senior pastor. Maybe I've been to seminary. Maybe I've done ministry for 50 years. Hopefully all of us still think we have something to learn, right? All of us can be humble and teachable enough to say, hey, to your coach, the person you found to coach you, hey, help me. I know I don't know everything. And coach, challenge some of the things I think I know that may not be helping me, that could be hindrances, that could be tradition, extra biblical tradition that I need to put aside to focus on your word. I wrote, you need the attitude of, I don't know everything and I'm eager to learn, right? Or else how is coaching going to be helpful to you? So number 4, be humble and teachable, or coaching will be of no value. Number 5, moving through them. Okay, number 5 is this: listen to the coach and follow what they say. Mind-blowing, right? Listen to the coach and follow what they say. You picked him as a coach because probably you want to see some of the things they've seen. You know, it's so easy, really, in anything, but I think especially in ministry, it's so easy to get a coach and then tweak what they say. What we learned in the early days is this: follow first, tweak later. Follow first, tweak later. Here's why. Because if I took what Stan was sharing with us and tweaked it, what if I tweak the power out of it? You know, what if the reason I'm wanting to tweak it is because it's encouraging me to do something I don't want to do, right? It's encouraging me to, you know, begin to have some kind of a habit or practice or be kept accountable in something that maybe I'm not comfortable with, you know? So we decided early on with Stan, whatever he says, to a certain degree, you guys understand what I'm saying, but to the degree we can, whatever he says, we're just going to do it. That's why we have him as a coach, just to challenge what we've been doing and to do what he's saying, because he's seen some things that we want to see. So the coach's process works. What we don't know is if your tweaks to the coach's process will work, right? I know that if we followed the DMM process is what I'm talking about, which the coaches on this call propagate and others. The DMM process has borne fruit around the world. So we know the DMM process works. What we don't know is if your tweaks to the DMM process work. Does that make sense? We don't know. Now, here's what I'm saying. I'm not saying you don't ever tweak. I'm just saying you don't tweak as a beginner. You don't tweak when you're first getting started because you don't know what you don't know, right? So you want to get a couple of years under your belt, that 2 to 3 with a coach. You're trying to follow what they say, trying to be led by their wisdom. And then you might say, hey, I'm pulling these things in from my past or experiences or whatever, and this is going to make it even better. I'm not saying you don't ever tweak. I'm saying our tendency, and again, pastors can be this way, our tendency is we hear something, it doesn't totally align with what we've been used to, so we tweak parts of it to make it more suited to kind of what we want to do. You could inadvertently tweak the power out of it. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just a brief illustration. Some of you guys know that I'm a tent maker, so I drive all of our income outside of ministry. And so years ago, I wanted to get into real estate investing. And so I got a real estate coach. And this guy was a great guy, godly guy. I got to know his pastor. He's in Florida. And he always spoke well of he was a coach, and you could pay him for coaching. And then there were a lot of other real estate coaches that could teach you real estate investing. And he used to talk so highly of the other coaches. But here's what he would always say. If you pick me as your coach, I want you to listen to me, follow what I say, and tune everybody else out. Initially, it comes across as like, well, couldn't the other coaches teach me something? And he would say, now, if you don't want to do that, here's what I would tell you. Go get another great real estate coach, pay him for coaching or her, and follow exactly what they say. But he said, here's what I'm telling you. I know that my process for investing in real estate works. I don't know, though, if you take my process and combine it with his and hers and his and hers and his and hers, I have no idea if that's going to get you results in real estate investing, right? But if you concentrate and you follow my process, I know I can get you results, or you can go find another great coach, and I'm sure he or she can get you results, but only if you follow their process. Do you get the idea? Same thing with DMM coaching. Really, it's important, I think, early on, and I'm going to talk more about this in the next point, to when you pick a coach or you pick a strategy like DMM, to focus on that, tune out some of the other voices. They can be helpful to you later, but in the early days, they can certainly make things more confusing. So you listen to a coach, you follow what they say, find a great coach, find a great coaching group and say, hey man, I'm going all in with this group for a while. And then maybe later on, I'll try to pull in some other things that could be helpful. So that's number 5, listen to the coach and follow what they say. Number 6, very related to this. And some of you may not know this, and I just have personal experience with this. But number 6 is that multiple coaches bring confusion and complexity in the early stages. Multiple coaches bring confusion and complexity in the early stages. Stan told me this. I've had people come and that went through our DMM training, and it was like, I've been through this training and that training, and they're all good, and I'm trying to put them together, and I'm so confused. Because a lot of times, you guys, when we get excited about movements, what do? Go read everything, right? Go take every coaching, and we're thinking, this is going to help me. The more coaching I get, the more people I listen, this is really going to help me. Guys, my experience in coaching people for many years is in the early stages, key words, the early stages, it can be really hurtful and confusing. I wrote down that there are many great CPM coaches out there with many CPM approaches that all work. But if you get coaching from several different people with several different approaches in the early days, you will get confused, right? DMM is a great process that can lead to church planting movements. T4T is a great process, but it's different than DMM. Zoom is a great process. It's different than those. 4 Fields is a great process. You hear what I'm saying? We're not here saying DMM is the way to go. We're just saying, hey, pick a process and follow it for a while. Give it time, over a couple of years and see what happens. And maybe you pivot somewhere else. But if you're being trained in DMM and trained in T4T and trained in Zoom and trained in 4 Fields early on, you guys have just seen it over and over again. It just confuses people. Now, what is a person of peace? They're defined in 4 different ways, depending on who I'm talking to. What is a group? What is you see what I'm saying? It's just kind of confusing. So early on, stick with one approach. You're here probably because you're wanting to go in with DMM. That's great. And DMM is not the only approach that leads to CPM, but you stick with one approach, you learn and study that approach, you follow a coach in that approach. And again, you just don't tweak it for a while. As you get more experience, though, here's what you'll find. After 2, 3, 4 years, you're going to get more experience. You're going to hear from some of the others, and you're going to be able to maybe create some kind of a hybrid. And that can be great. Stan talks about that. But Stan would agree that in the beginning, it can be really confusing. So I would say early on, if you've just finished the training, you're coming into this, man, pretty much try to stick with DMM voices, and you'll be hearing the same things, and they'll be affirming what you've heard. The other voices are great too. But early on, it can just add confusion. So for us, we stuck with DMM early on. We weren't going through any other tracks. We didn't have any other coaches, and we listened to Stan. We tried to tune out everything else and did what he said, not because he's the only one that knows how to catalyze CPMs, right? But because we needed to stick with a process, follow a coach in order to have the best chances of seeing what we want to see, which is to catalyze a movement. All right, that's number 6. Multiple coaches bring confusion and complexity in the early stages. Find one, stick with it, listen to them, stick with the process. 2 more. Number 7, ask good questions in your ongoing coaching group. Ask good questions. Part of the reason you have a coach and that it's one of the 7 high value activities is that you don't always know your next step. That's why I'm one kind of language change I would encourage the coaches with, and they may already be using this language, and it's the language of the questions, but I think this would be a helpful language change in our breakout groups, is instead of talking about what's your I will for this week, that's great in a discovery Bible study. But in a coaching meeting, really what you're looking for is a next step. And here's why I'm differentiating between those two. Because usually an I will is kind of between you and God, right? It's what the Lord's telling you to do. That's great when you're reading his word and trying to figure out how to obey him. But in a coaching group where you're looking for practical advice on next steps, I like the language of what is your next step, because it invites your coach to speak into it. It invites your folks in your breakout group to speak into it. We really shouldn't be trying to figure out our next step by ourselves, especially if you're newer. You may not know what your next step is. You know what you should do? You should go to your breakout group, and when the coach says, so what's your next step for this week? You should say, excuse me, Jim. Excuse me, Brent. I don't know. What do you suggest? Or to the group, hey, I'm stuck in the process here. What do you suggest my next step is? We should ask good questions in our coaching groups. And again, the reason we have a +1 coach is they may be a few steps ahead, and they can help you get good next steps each week. that over those 48 can compound and lead to something really great. So again, I would encourage you in your breakout groups to not think of each week what you're being held accountable for an I will or something just between you and God. I would encourage you to think of it as a next step that you want the group's help with. You want the coach's help with. Here's where I'm at. We all know where I want to go. Coach, peers, what do you think? What's my next step? Hey, well, I think you should do this. Hey, I think this could be good. Or hey, I tried this. It's going to help you with your next steps so much. That's number 7. If you lesson learned from ongoing coaching, we try to do this with Stan. Ask good questions. That's why you have a coach. Number 8. Number 8's the last one. Pass on what you learn. Like we said at the beginning, right now I'm mainly talking about you being coached. But the goal of all this is for you to coach others. All of us learned in the DMM training that we should immediately be passing on what we're learning, right? So we tried to do that. So once Stan coached us, guess what we did? We started training people and we had a coaching call. And we had this call. Some of you guys may have been on it. I mean, we had how many screens? We got 50 screens right now. You guys, a couple of years ago, it's my screen like 3 screens, okay? Nobody even knows what DMM is, you know? And we're trying to kind of pass on what Stan's been sharing with us, that he's passing on from what he's learned from Movement Catalyst overseas, right? So one of the lessons learned from ongoing coaching is your coaching, the coaching that's being given to you is even more helpful if you're passing it on, because if you have to teach it or you have to pass it on, guess what? You internalize it better, right? You know that if you're sharing it with somebody else, you understand it. You've thought it through because you've thought about how am I going to share this with, this other person. So pass on what you learn. We would encourage you, in addition, this is a group for catalytic leaders. We're going to talk about that in a minute. In addition to you coming to this group, I hope you have another coaching group where you're doing this, something very similar in your local area with people that may not be catalytic leaders. My hope for you as a catalytic leader is that you'd be in a catalytic leaders coaching group like this one, but then you'd also be leading coaching groups with the people you're training, right? That need coaching, that may not be fit for a catalytic leader call. That's not the vision the Lord has given them. Okay. So we're passing on what we learned. You're coming to this call, you're learning, and you're starting your own coaching groups. And you're passing on what you learned to them, and it's helping you internalize it, and it's making the coaching you're receiving even more effective. So I could keep going, but those are 8 of the lessons that I've learned that I think have made ongoing coaching for us and our team even more helpful over the years.